I am so glad you have joined us in the hush of the evening. You have found your way to Science Blanket, your own soft space for deep slumber. Have you ever held a tiny seed in your hand and felt like you were holding a long, sleeping dream of a summer field? This evening, we are wrapping ourselves in the science of the frozen mountain, specifically the silent, safe life of the Svalbard Seed Vault. We usually see seeds as small, dry things, but they are really just echoes of the sun, millions of sleeping lives held in a soft balance between the white snow and the deep, dark stone. From the light, tiny grains that feel like soft sand to the heavy, round seeds that hold the soul of a forest, this vault is the visible sign of the world's invisible hope. As we begin, imagine yourself resting in a hall of blue ice, feeling as safe and as still as the seeds themselves. You do not need to worry about the cold of the pole or the names of the ancient plants tonight. Just let the slow, frozen peace of the mountain wash over you and tuck you in. Allow this blanket of snow and sleeping life to be your guide as you move toward a deep and mindless rest. Now, take a slow, easy breath. Feel your chest rise and fall, as smooth and as sure as a low ocean wave. Let the heaviness of your day dissolve into the cool, blue shadows of the mountain. Release your jaw, let your shoulders slide down, and sink into the softness of your bed. Let's explore the quiet wonders of the Seed Vault together. Somewhere in the far northern reaches of our world, where the ocean stretches cold and silver beneath endless skies, there exists a place so remote that polar bears wander more freely than people do. This is Svalbard, an archipelago that belongs to Norway, a scattering of islands where ice and stone meet in silence, and where the population of massive white bears, some 3,600 of them, actually outnumbers the human residents, who total only about 2,600 souls. It's a landscape where nature still holds dominion, where the air itself seems to shimmer with a quality of untouched stillness, and it's here, on an island called Spitsbergen, that humanity has chosen to build something extraordinary, something that speaks to both our deepest fears and our most enduring hopes for the future. The island of Spitsbergen rises from the Arctic waters with a certain ancient dignity, its mountains worn smooth by countless centuries of wind and ice, its valleys carved by glacier that have slowly, patiently shaped the land into something that feels almost like a sculpture. Among these mountains stands one called Plateauberget, which translates simply and beautifully to Plateau Mountain, a name that captures its broad, flat summit and its steady, unchanging presence. This mountain was chosen very carefully, very thoughtfully, because buried deep within its stone heart lies the Svalbard Global Seed Vault, a facility designed to safeguard something precious beyond measure, the seeds of our world's food crops, preserved against whatever uncertainties the future might hold. The choice of this particular location, this specific mountain on this specific island, involved years of research and consideration, with scientists and engineers examining countless possibilities across the Arctic regions. They searched for a place that combined remoteness with accessibility, isolation with infrastructure, natural stability with human oversight. Svalbard emerged as the ideal answer to this complex equation, offering a balance of factors that simply couldn't be matched anywhere else on our planet. The very remoteness that makes it challenging to reach also makes it secure, protected not by walls and guards but by sheer distance and the formidable nature of the Arctic environment itself. The vault sits at 130 meters above sea level, a height that was selected with great care and consideration, positioned near the small Longyearbyen airport where supply planes can land and where workers can reach the facility even in the harshest weather. This elevation provides essential protection from flooding, from the rising waters that climate scientists study and measure, from the melting ice that shifts and changes with each passing season. The surrounding landscape slopes away gently, allowing any water to flow downward and away, ensuring that even in the most extreme scenarios, even if ice shelves were to collapse and ocean levels were to shift dramatically, the seeds inside would remain safe and dry, cradled in their mountain sanctuary. The engineers who designed this facility studied sea level projections extending hundreds of years into the future, considering scenarios that most of us find difficult even to imagine, and they built accordingly, with margins of safety that account for changes we can predict and even some we cannot. But the real security, the truly remarkable protection, comes from the sheer mass of rock that surrounds and embraces the storage chambers themselves. The seed storage area rests beneath 40 to 60 meters of solid stone, layers upon layers of ancient sandstone that have stood for millions of years, weathering storms and ice ages, remaining constant while the world above has transformed again and again. This rock acts as a shield, a guardian, absorbing any shock, maintaining steady temperatures, and creating a barrier between the precious seeds and the variable, unpredictable conditions of the surface world. The weight of this stone is almost incomprehensible when you consider it fully. Thousands upon thousands of metric tons pressing down and around the vault chambers, creating a cocoon of protection that no human construction could ever match. From the entrance of the vault, from that heavy door set into the mountainside, to the very back of the facility where the deepest chambers hold their silent cargo, the distance measures approximately 145.9 meters, nearly the length of 1.5 football fields, a substantial journey into the heart of the mountain. Walking this distance, you would pass through corridors that descend gradually, steadily, taking you deeper and deeper into a realm where sunlight never reaches, where temperatures remain constant regardless of the season above, where time itself seems to slow and settle into something more geological than human. The tunnel that leads into the mountain was carved with precision, following the natural grain of the rock, respecting the structure of the stone even as it was shaped to serve this human purpose. The actual vault rooms, those chambers where millions upon millions of seeds rest in their careful organization, sit buried more than 120 meters from the front door, positioned at the absolute deepest point of the facility. This distance wasn't chosen arbitrarily or casually. It represents a calculation, a determination of exactly how much rock and earth would be needed to provide maximum security, maximum stability, maximum protection from any conceivable threat. These rooms exist in a space that feels separate from the ordinary world, insulated not just by distance but by the sheer weight and solidity of the mountain itself. To stand in these chambers is to experience a silence that's almost total, a stillness that's profound, with the only sounds being the gentle hum of climate control systems and perhaps the whisper of your own breathing in that carefully regulated atmosphere. The sandstone that surrounds these chambers possesses another remarkable quality, one that makes it especially suitable for this particular purpose. This stone contains naturally low levels of radiation, far lower than many other types of rock, which means that the seeds stored here are protected not just from physical threats but from the subtle, invisible forces that can damage living tissue over long periods of time. Radiation, even in small amounts, can affect the viability of seeds, can alter their genetic material in ways that might prevent them from germinating properly when they're finally needed. But here, wrapped in this particular sandstone, the seeds rest in an environment that's as close to perfectly inert as nature can provide. Geologists studied core samples from Plateau Mountain extensively before construction began, analyzing the composition of the rock at various depths, ensuring that this natural shielding would remain effective not just for years or decades, but for centuries and even millennia into the future. Perhaps most fascinating of all is the temperature of the bedrock itself, the solid stone that forms the bones of Plateau Mountain. This rock maintains a constant temperature of -3 degrees Celsius, A cold that's reliable and unchanging, a cold that's been measured and confirmed and studied carefully. This natural refrigeration means that even if every mechanical system in the vault were to fail, even if the cooling equipment stopped functioning and the backup generators went silent and no human returned to tend the facility for decades or even centuries, the seeds would remain frozen, preserved by the mountain itself. Scientists have calculated that it would take centuries for the bedrock to warm enough to thaw the seeds, centuries during which humanity might recover from whatever catastrophe had caused the abandonment, might return to reclaim its agricultural heritage. This characteristic of the bedrock, this natural, perpetual cold, transforms the mountain itself into a kind of passive guardian, requiring no power source, no maintenance, no human intervention to continue its protective work. And there's something else about Svalbard that makes it uniquely suited to this particular mission, something that speaks to the otherworldly quality of this place. During the winter months, for 4 full months of every year, the sun never rises above the horizon. The polar night descends, and the world outside the vault exists in a state of perpetual twilight, a soft darkness broken only by stars and moon and the occasional shimmer of northern lights dancing across the sky. During these months, no sunlight reaches the facility, no solar warmth affects the operations, and the vault continues its work in a darkness that feels absolute and complete. This absence of light, this seasonal submission to shadow, creates conditions where temperatures remain especially stable, where the natural cold of the Arctic winter helps maintain the frozen state of the seeds within their mountain fortress. The facility operates according to its own rhythm during these dark months, with workers arriving and departing by the artificial lights of the airport, by the glow of headlamps and facility lighting, by the careful navigation of people who have learned to move through a world where day and night have lost their usual meaning. There's something almost meditative about this arrangement, something that speaks to the long view, to the patient, unhurried purpose of the vault itself. Just as the seeds inside wait in their frozen stillness for some future need, the facility waits through its annual cycle of light and darkness, through its seasons of midnight sun and polar night, maintaining its vigil regardless of what unfolds in the world beyond the mountain. The polar night is not an obstacle here, but rather another form of protection, another layer of insulation that keeps this place separate from the ordinary rhythms of human civilization, allowing it to exist in its own time, following its own essential purpose. The story of how this remarkable facility came to exist begins not with a single moment of inspiration, but with a gradual awakening, a slow realization that spread across decades and across the minds of scientists and conservationists who understood that something precious was slipping away. Back in the 1980s, when the world was just beginning to grasp the full scope of how much agricultural diversity was being lost with each passing year, a group of forward-thinking individuals in the Nordic countries began to consider what might be done, how humanity might preserve the incredible variety of seeds that our ancestors had cultivated and saved and passed down through countless generations. These early conversations, these initial explorations of possibility, would eventually lead to something far grander than anyone initially imagined, but they began modestly, with practical concerns and local solutions. In 1984, the Nordic Gene Bank took a significant step forward in this mission of preservation, establishing a backup storage facility in a nearby coal mine, using the natural cold and stability of the underground environment to safeguard seeds from Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, and Iceland. This wasn't the grand global facility that exists today, but rather something more modest, more experimental, a test of whether such long-term storage could work, whether seeds could truly survive in frozen darkness for years or even decades without losing their ability to sprout and grow. The coal mine, with its constant cool temperatures and its protection from the elements, proved to be an excellent temporary solution, and the seeds stored there remained viable, demonstrating that the basic concept was sound, that this kind of preservation was not just theoretically possible but practically achievable. For nearly 2 decades, this arrangement continued, with the Nordic Gene Bank quietly maintaining its collection in the depths of the old mine, adding new samples, monitoring conditions, learning what worked and what didn't. But as the years passed, as the 21st century approached and then arrived, it became increasingly clear that the world needed something more comprehensive, something that could serve not just the Nordic countries but all of humanity, a truly global repository that could act as the ultimate insurance policy for our food security. This awareness grew among scientists and agricultural experts worldwide, a shared understanding that climate change, conflicts, natural disasters, and simple human error were placing national seed banks at risk, that collections were being lost, that irreplaceable genetic diversity was vanishing before anyone could properly document or preserve it. In 2001, an organization called Biodiversity International, which had been working on agricultural biodiversity issues around the world, approached the Norwegian government with a proposal. They suggested that Norway, with its stable political situation, its commitment to international cooperation, and its unique Arctic geography, would be the ideal nation to host a global seed facility, a place where every country could send backup samples of their most important crop varieties for safekeeping. The proposal was ambitious and complex, requiring international agreements and significant financial investment, but it resonated with Norwegian values around environmental stewardship and global responsibility, and serious discussions began about how such a facility might be designed and operated. The person who would become most closely associated with bringing this vision to reality was Kerry Fowler, a conservationist who had spent much of his career studying agricultural biodiversity and advocating for its preservation. In 2003, Fowler began actively spearheading the concept of what would become the Svalbard Global Seed Vault, working tirelessly to build support among governments and institutions, to secure funding, and to develop a clear vision of what the ultimate gene bank backup should look like. Fowler understood that this facility needed to be more than just a storage space. It needed to be a symbol, a statement of humanity's commitment to preserving the biological foundation of our food systems, a place that could withstand whatever challenges the future might bring and ensure that the seeds of our most essential crops would survive for generations yet to come. By 2004, enough momentum had gathered that a comprehensive feasibility study could be commissioned, with Fowler's team examining potential locations across the Arctic regions, considering various sites in different countries, evaluating geological stability, temperature conditions, accessibility, and political factors. The study was thorough and methodical, weighing numerous variables and running countless scenarios. But as the data accumulated and the analysis deepened, one location emerged as clearly superior to all the others. Svalbard, with its unique combination of natural permafrost that provided passive refrigeration, its remoteness that offered security, its stable bedrock that resisted seismic activity, and its location within Norwegian territory that ensured political stability and good governance, was identified as the optimal site. The permafrost was especially crucial. This naturally frozen ground that extends deep into the earth would provide backup cooling even if all mechanical systems failed, a natural insurance policy written in ice and stone. Once the location had been selected and the decision had been made to move forward, the practical work of actually creating this facility could begin. Statsbygg, which serves as Norway's public construction agency responsible for building and managing government facilities, took charge of the planning and construction management starting in 2005. Statsbygg brought considerable expertise to the project, having overseen countless construction projects across Norway, including some in extremely challenging Arctic conditions, and they assembled a team that could handle the unique requirements of this particular endeavor. the need to tunnel deep into a mountain to create climate-controlled chambers, to build something that would last not just for years but for centuries. Something that could withstand both the immediate challenges of Arctic weather and the long-term uncertainties of a changing climate. The engineering drawings for the vault were created by Peter Soderman, a Finnish architect who specialized in functional design for extreme environments, who understood how to create structures that could endure harsh conditions while still serving their intended purpose with elegance and efficiency. Soderman's designs had to account for numerous factors: the flow of cold air through the facility, the structural integrity of tunnels carved through sandstone, the placement of doors and chambers to maximize security while allowing for necessary human access, the routing of power and communication lines, and countless other details that would determine whether this ambitious project would succeed or fail. His drawings represented months of careful calculation and consideration, translating the abstract goals of seed preservation into concrete plans that builders and engineers could follow. The planning process involved extensive collaboration among various government bodies and expert organizations, with 5 different Norwegian ministries coming together on a coordinating committee to oversee different aspects of the project: agriculture, foreign affairs, environment, finance, and others, each bringing their own perspective and expertise to ensure that all aspects of the facility's design and operation would be properly addressed. Working alongside these government representatives were experts from NordGen, the organization that had emerged from the original Nordic Gene Bank and that would eventually manage the day-to-day operations of the vault, as well as representatives from the Crop Trust, an international organization dedicated to conserving crop diversity that would help coordinate deposits from gene banks around the world. These meetings, these discussions among people with different backgrounds and different areas of knowledge, helped shape the facility into something more comprehensive and more thoughtfully designed than any single organization could have created alone. The project gained formal political backing in June of 2007, when the Nordic Council of Ministers, a forum for cooperation among the Nordic countries, passed an official resolution supporting the establishment of the Svalbard Global Seed Vault. This resolution represented more than just symbolic support. It demonstrated a regional commitment to the project's goals and values, a shared understanding among the Nordic nations that this facility would serve not just Norwegian interests but the interests of all humanity, that it represented a kind of gift to the future, a safeguard against uncertainties that no one could fully predict but that everyone could recognize as real and present dangers. The resolution helped solidify international support for the project and reinforce the sense that this was truly a global endeavor, not just a national one. But the real work, the physical transformation of concept into reality, had actually begun a year earlier, in 2006, when construction crews arrived at Plateau Mountain and began the process of tunneling into its ancient stone. The construction phase would involve drilling, blasting, excavating, reinforcing, and countless other tasks, all carried out in one of the most challenging environments on Earth, where winter temperatures plunge far below freezing and where the logistics of bringing materials and equipment to such a remote location added layers of complexity to every aspect of the work. Yet the crews persisted, slowly carving out the chambers and corridors that would house humanity's agricultural insurance policy, creating a space that was both utterly modern in its purpose and technology and somehow ancient in its setting. A marriage of human ingenuity and natural protection that would stand as a testament to our capacity for long-term thinking and our commitment to preserving the diversity of life that sustains us all. The ceremonial beginning of this extraordinary project came on a summer day in 2006, on June 19th, when prime ministers from the Nordic countries gathered on the mountainside to lay what would be called the first stone, a symbolic gesture that marked the official start of construction and signaled to the world that this ambitious vision was becoming real. The ceremony took place under the endless daylight of the Arctic summer, when the sun circles the sky without setting, casting long golden rays across the landscape, illuminating the rocky slopes of Plateau Mountain where machinery and workers had already begun their careful excavation into the ancient stone. These leaders, standing together in that remote location, understood that they were participating in something larger than politics, larger than national interests. They were helping to create a facility that would serve all of humanity, a gift to future generations who might face challenges we can only imagine, who might need access to the seeds preserved here in ways we cannot fully predict. The actual tunneling and construction continued through the following months and into the next year, with workers laboring through the dark polar winter and then through another bright summer, slowly carving out the chambers and corridors, installing the cooling systems and security measures, testing and refining every aspect of the facility to ensure it would function exactly as designed. And finally, after all the planning and all the physical work, after all the international coordination and technical problem-solving, the Svalbard Global Seed Vault was ready to receive its first deposits. The official opening ceremony took place on February 26, 2008, on a winter day when the sun had just begun to return after the long polar night, when the landscape existed in that transitional state between darkness and light that feels somehow appropriate for a facility dedicated to preserving possibilities for the future. The opening ceremony brought together dignitaries and scientists from around the world, with Norway's Prime Minister delivering a speech about the significance of the facility, about what it represented in terms of international cooperation and long-term thinking, about the responsibilities that come with stewardship of something so precious and so essential to human survival. Representatives from the United Nations also spoke, placing the vault in the broader context of global efforts to address food security and climate change, emphasizing how this facility would serve as a safety net for the world's agricultural systems, a place where the genetic diversity of our food crops could be preserved even as those crops faced mounting pressures from changing weather patterns, from expanding cities, from conflicts and natural disasters that threatened seed banks in vulnerable locations around the world. The opening shipments that arrived for that inaugural ceremony were substantial and impressive, representing years of preparation by gene banks around the planet who had carefully selected, packaged, and transported their most important seed samples to this Arctic repository. The initial deposits included over 320,000 separate accessions, each accession representing a distinct variety of a crop, a unique genetic line that had been developed and maintained somewhere in the world, often over many generations. These accessions came from GIA, an international agricultural research consortium that maintains major seed collections for crops that feed billions of people, as well as from national gene banks in dozens of countries, each contributing samples of their most valuable and most threatened varieties. The total weight of these opening shipments reached 10 tons, an enormous mass of carefully sealed packets and containers, each one holding seeds that might someday be crucial to humanity's ability to feed itself. These inaugural seeds arrived packed into 676 boxes, each box carefully labeled and documented, each one representing countless hours of work by scientists and technicians who had selected the seeds, tested their viability, dried them to the precise moisture content needed for long-term storage, sealed them in special foil packets that would protect them from moisture and oxygen, and then arranged them in containers that could withstand the journey to Svalbard and the transfer into the vault's frozen chambers. The sheer logistics of organizing and transporting this first shipment were remarkable, involving coordination across time zones and continents, requiring special permits and careful handling at every stage, ensuring that these precious seeds would arrive safely and be properly stored in their new home deep within the mountain. The deposits didn't stop with that opening ceremony. They continued to arrive as more gene banks around the world prepared their samples and arranged shipments to Svalbard. By 2009, Just a year after opening, the vault's collection had grown substantially, reaching 423,899 different seed types representing crops from 219 countries. This rapid growth demonstrated the enthusiasm with which the global scientific community had embraced the facility, the recognition that this was indeed a crucial backup system, a kind of biological insurance policy that gave gene banks around the world peace of mind, knowing that even if disaster struck their own collections, copies of their most important seeds would remain safe in the Arctic, preserved for future recovery and use. The significance of this achievement didn't go unnoticed by the broader public and media. Time magazine, one of the most widely read publications in the world, included the Svalbard Global Seed Vault in its annual ranking of the best inventions, placing it 6th on the list for 2008. This recognition brought the facility to the attention of millions of people who might never have heard of gene banks or seed conservation, helping to raise awareness about the importance of agricultural biodiversity and the threats it faces, making the vault a symbol not just for scientists and policymakers but for ordinary citizens concerned about the future of food and the health of our planet. The fact that a seed storage facility could be ranked alongside technological innovations and consumer products spoke to how well Kerry Fowler and others had succeeded in communicating the vault's importance, in making this story of preservation and foresight resonate with people far beyond the scientific community. The Project Management Institute, an organization that studies and recognizes excellence in complex project execution, also honored the Svalbard Global Seed Vault by ranking it among the most influential projects completed in the past 50 years. This recognition focused on different aspects of the achievement, not just the facility's purpose but the remarkable coordination and execution required to bring it into existence, the way it had overcome logistical challenges and technical obstacles, the successful collaboration among multiple governments and international organizations, the completion of construction in an extremely harsh environment, and the creation of systems that would allow the facility to function reliably for centuries to come. For project management professionals, the vault represented a kind of ideal, a demonstration of how ambitious goals could be achieved through careful planning, international cooperation, and sustained commitment to a shared vision. In 2011, Norway's Postal Service issued a commemorative postage stamp featuring the Svalbard Global Seed Vault, a small but meaningful gesture that placed the facility alongside other national achievements and cultural landmarks deemed worthy of this honor. Postage stamps, though perhaps less commonly used than in previous generations, still carry symbolic weight, still represent a kind of official recognition that something is important enough to be memorialized in this particular way. The stamp's design captured the distinctive entrance to the vault, with its striking illuminated artwork that marks the tunnel opening, and its issuance meant that millions of letters and packages would carry this image across Norway and around the world, spreading awareness of the facility and its mission in a quiet, persistent way that official announcements and media coverage could never quite match. As the years passed and the vault continued its work quietly and reliably, accepting new deposits and maintaining its collections in frozen stasis, the approach of the 10-year anniversary prompted reflection and celebration. In 2018, exactly a decade after the official opening, the facility hosted what was called the Seed Vault Summit, bringing together representatives from gene banks, international agricultural organizations, government agencies, and research institutions from around the world. This gathering provided an opportunity to assess what had been accomplished, to discuss challenges that had emerged, to share knowledge about seed conservation techniques, and to coordinate future efforts to expand and improve the global system of crop diversity preservation that the Svalbard facility anchored and supported. The summit discussions ranged across numerous topics: the state of agricultural biodiversity globally, the increasing threats from climate change and other pressures, The gaps in what had been preserved and what still needed to be collected and deposited, the technical challenges of maintaining seed viability over very long time periods, and the ways in which the vault's existence had influenced conservation efforts in countries around the world. Participants shared stories of how the vault had already served as a backup when gene banks in conflict zones or disaster areas had lost portions of their collections, how seeds had been withdrawn from Svalbard and used to rebuild those collections, demonstrating that this facility wasn't just theoretical insurance but a practical resource that had already proven its worth. The summit reinforced the sense that the vault represented not an ending but a beginning, not a completed project but an ongoing commitment, a living system that would need continued support and attention for generations to come if it was to fulfill its promise of safeguarding the genetic foundation of human food security far into an uncertain future. Deep within the rocky mass of Plateau Mountain, carved 130 meters into ancient sandstone that has stood firm for millions of years, the vault exists in a state of carefully controlled preservation, surrounded and protected by permafrost that extends through the stone like nature's own refrigeration system. This permafrost, ground that remains frozen year-round regardless of surface temperatures, wraps around the facility in layers of ice-bound earth and rock, creating an envelope of cold that serves as the vault's first and most fundamental line of defense against the warming that could threaten the seeds within. The decision to tunnel so deeply into this particular mountain, to place the storage chambers in the embrace of this frozen geology, reflects an understanding that the most reliable protection often comes not from human engineering alone but from partnership with natural systems that have proven their stability across geological timescales. Inside these chambers, carved from living rock and lined with reinforced structures, the temperature is maintained at a constant -18 degrees Celsius, a carefully selected coldness that has been determined through decades of research to be optimal for preserving seed viability across the longest possible time spans. This temperature represents a sweet spot in the science of seed preservation, cold enough to dramatically slow the metabolic processes that cause seeds to age and lose their ability to germinate, yet not so cold that it causes damage to the delicate structures within the seed tissue itself. At -18 degrees, with the low humidity that the facility also maintains, seeds enter a state of suspended animation, their life processes slowed to the barest minimum, their genetic material protected from the gradual degradation that would occur at warmer temperatures or in the presence of moisture. Research has shown that under these conditions of cold and dryness, different types of seeds can remain viable for vastly different periods, some for decades, others for centuries, and certain hardy species potentially for thousands of years before their germination rates begin to decline significantly. This range of longevity depends on the particular characteristics of each crop species, on the initial quality and health of the seeds when they were deposited, on how carefully they were dried and prepared before storage, and on subtle genetic factors that scientists are still working to fully understand. But what remains consistent across all these variations is that the conditions within the vault extend seed life far beyond what would be possible in ordinary storage, far beyond what most national gene banks can achieve, creating a reservoir of agricultural potential that could serve humanity not just in the immediate future but across generations and even centuries to come. The physical structure of the vault has been engineered to withstand catastrophic events that we hope will never occur but that prudent planning demands we consider. The facility is designed to remain intact and functional even in the face of earthquakes reaching magnitude 10 on the Richter scale, a level of seismic activity that represents the absolute upper limit of what our planet can produce, far exceeding any earthquake that has been recorded in modern history. This extreme standard of seismic resistance reflects both the geological assessment of the site, which sits in a relatively stable region with low earthquake risk, and a philosophical commitment to building something that could survive even the most unlikely disasters, ensuring that whatever happens to the world above, the seeds below will remain protected and accessible. The concrete walls that line the tunnels and chambers are 1 meter thick, a massive solidity that provides protection comparable to that of a nuclear bunker, designed to withstand not just natural forces but potential human threats as well. These walls were poured and reinforced with careful attention to their structural integrity, with the concrete mixed to specifications that ensure it will maintain its strength even in the intense cold of the Arctic environment, where ordinary concrete might crack or crumble over time. This thickness of reinforcement makes the storage chambers essentially blast-proof, able to absorb and dissipate enormous forces without compromising the safety of the seeds within, creating multiple redundant layers of protection that stack together: the mountain itself, the permafrost, the reinforced concrete, and the sealed containers that hold the seeds, each layer adding to the overall security of the collection. The air that circulates through the facility undergoes careful conditioning as it enters, passing through a sophisticated heat exchanger system that addresses one of the challenges of operating in such an extreme environment. Outside, the Arctic air during winter can reach temperatures of -25°C or even colder, and if this air were to enter the facility directly, it could create temperature fluctuations and ice buildup that would complicate operations and potentially affect storage conditions. So the incoming air is gradually warmed as it passes through the exchanger, rising from that exterior cold to about -7°C before it reaches the areas where humans work, and then cooling again as it flows deeper into the mountain toward the seed storage chambers, where it helps maintain that crucial -18° temperature. This system allows fresh air to circulate, preventing any buildup of stale air or contaminants, while maintaining the precise thermal conditions that the seeds require. The electrical power that runs these climate control systems, that powers the lights and security systems and monitoring equipment, comes primarily from Longyearby's public power plant, delivered through cables that run from the small settlement to the vault facility. This connection to the municipal power grid provides reliable electricity generated by infrastructure that serves the entire community, ensuring that the vault benefits from the same systems that keep homes warm and businesses operating in this challenging environment. But recognizing that even reliable systems can fail, that power outages can occur for various reasons from equipment failure to severe storms, the facility also maintains backup generators that can automatically activate if the main power supply is interrupted, ensuring continuous operation of critical systems even during emergencies. The power plant that supplies electricity to both the vault and the broader Longyearbyen community has been designed to incorporate renewable energy sources, reducing reliance on fossil fuels and minimizing the facility's environmental impact. This commitment to sustainable operation reflects the same forward-thinking philosophy that inspired the vault's creation, a recognition that preserving seeds for the future should be done in ways that don't compromise that future through unnecessary carbon emissions or environmental degradation. The renewable energy flowing through the facility's systems represents a harmony between the vault's mission of biological preservation and the broader goal of environmental sustainability, demonstrating that conservation and responsible resource use can work together rather than existing in tension. Yet even with all these engineered systems, with all the careful planning and sophisticated technology, the vault's ultimate security comes from something simpler and more fundamental: the permafrost itself. If electrical power were to fail completely, if the backup generators ran out of fuel and no one came to repair or refuel them, if the facility were somehow abandoned and left without human attention for years or decades or even centuries, the seeds would remain frozen. The permafrost that surrounds the chambers would continue its work without requiring any power source, any maintenance, any human intervention whatsoever. The bedrock temperature of -3°C, combined with the insulating effect of the mountain and the residual cold within the chambers themselves, would keep the seeds well below freezing for an almost incomprehensible length of time. Scientists have calculated that under these passive conditions, it would take centuries for the temperature in the storage chambers to rise enough to threaten the seeds, centuries during which the permafrost would continue its patient, reliable work of preservation. The entrance tunnel, that long corridor that leads from the mountainside into the heart of the facility, was designed with a subtle but crucial feature. It slopes upward as it penetrates deeper into the mountain. This upward grade, though gentle enough that walking it feels nearly level, serves as protection against one of the most persistent threats in any underground facility: water. Whether from melting snow, from rainfall, from any source of moisture that might somehow enter the tunnel system, the upward slope ensures that water cannot flow deeper into the mountain, cannot reach the storage chambers where the seeds rest in their frozen preservation. Gravity becomes an ally in this design, pulling any moisture back toward the entrance, back toward the outside world, keeping the interior spaces dry and secure. This simple geometric decision, this choice to tunnel upward rather than level or downward, demonstrates how thoughtful design can work with natural forces rather than against them, creating protection that requires no energy, no maintenance, no human vigilance, but simply relies on the unchanging pull of gravity and the careful planning that placed it in service of the Vault's mission. In 2016, an event occurred that tested the Vault's resilience in ways that the designers had anticipated but hoped would never materialize. Heavy rainfall arrived in Svalbard during a period of unusually warm weather, a combination that brought more water to the mountainside than the drainage systems had been designed to handle, and moisture began to seep into the entrance tunnel, flowing along pathways through the rock and along construction joints where water could find passage. This water penetrated approximately 15 meters into the tunnel, creating a moment of concern for those responsible for the facility's operation, prompting questions about whether the climate was changing faster than had been predicted, whether the protections that had seemed so robust might prove inadequate against conditions that were becoming increasingly unpredictable and extreme. But the water never reached the seed storage chambers, never came close to threatening the precious collections held deep within the mountain. The cold of the Arctic environment, the chill of the tunnel itself and of the rock surrounding it, caused the infiltrating moisture to freeze before it could travel further, transforming from a liquid threat into harmless ice that could be removed during the next maintenance visit. This incident demonstrated both a vulnerability and a strength. A vulnerability in that climate change was creating conditions that challenged even carefully designed systems, but a strength in that the fundamental principle of keeping everything cold, of working with the Arctic environment rather than against it, provided a backup protection that functioned even when other systems were stressed or overwhelmed. The water intrusion, though ultimately harmless to the seeds, prompted serious reflection and decisive action from the Norwegian government and the organizations responsible for the Vault's operation. If changing climate patterns were creating conditions that the original design hadn't fully accounted for, then improvements and upgrades would be necessary to ensure the facility could continue its mission reliably for the centuries ahead. Between 2018 and 2020, Norway invested approximately €20 million in a comprehensive upgrade program, a substantial commitment that demonstrated the nation's ongoing dedication to maintaining the Vault's security and functionality regardless of the changing conditions in the Arctic environment surrounding it. These upgrades drew upon some of the most advanced waterproofing technology available, specifically techniques that had been developed and proven in one of the most demanding environments imaginable, the North Sea oil platforms that extract petroleum from beneath some of the world's most turbulent and unforgiving waters. The engineers and contractors who maintain these offshore structures have developed sophisticated methods for keeping water out of critical systems, for sealing joints and surfaces against constant exposure to moisture and pressure, and these same techniques were adapted and applied to the vault's entrance systems. New drainage channels were installed, surfaces were treated with advanced sealants, and monitoring systems were enhanced to provide early warning if moisture began to accumulate in ways that could pose problems. The upgrade program also included the construction of a new office building near the vault entrance, providing workspace for staff when they visit to conduct inspections or oversee seed deposits, and a parking area where vehicles can be safely left during operations. These additions improved the functionality of the facility, making it easier for workers to perform their duties in comfort and safety despite the harsh Arctic conditions, while also reducing the amount of activity and disturbance within the tunnel itself, helping to maintain the environmental stability that's so crucial for seed preservation. The office building, though modest in size, represents a recognition that even a facility designed for minimal human presence still requires some infrastructure to support the people who ensure its continued operation. Following the 2018 completion of these upgrades, security protocols at the vault were substantially enhanced and tightened, with new restrictions that now bar media representatives from entering the vault interior. Previously, journalists and filmmakers had occasionally been granted access to document the facility and share images of the seed chambers with the public, but the decision was made to limit such visits to maintain tighter control over who enters the storage areas and under what circumstances. This shift reflects both increased security consciousness globally and a desire to minimize traffic through the facility, to reduce the number of times the chambers are opened and exposed to warmer air, to maintain the integrity of the storage environment as consistently as possible. The public can still see the distinctive entrance with its illuminated artwork, still learn about the vault's mission and operations, but the actual seed chambers have become more restricted, more protected, existing in a state of greater isolation from the outside world. The facility operates without any full-time staff present on site, a remarkable feature that distinguishes it from most important repositories and storage facilities around the world. There are no guards stationed at the entrance, no technicians monitoring systems around the clock, no administrators working in offices within the mountain. Instead, the vault relies on automated systems that monitor temperature, humidity, and security status continuously, transmitting data back to offices in Longyearbyen and beyond where experts can review conditions and respond to any anomalies or alerts. This minimal human presence serves multiple purposes. It reduces operational costs, it minimizes the risk of human error or malicious action, and it reinforces the sense that this facility exists on a different timescale than ordinary human institutions, operating with a patience and persistence that doesn't require constant attention or intervention. Security for the facility functions through a sophisticated system of split access codes, a design that ensures no single individual can enter the vault alone, that at least two authorized people must work together to unlock the chambers and access the seeds within. This arrangement, common in high-security facilities like bank vaults and military installations, protects against both external threats and potential insider risks, creating a system where cooperation and oversight are built into every access event. The codes themselves are held by different organizations, representatives from the Norwegian government and from the international organizations that coordinate seed deposits, ensuring that control remains distributed and that no single entity has unilateral power over the collection. Maintenance of the facility occurs through annual inspections conducted by teams that combine Norwegian government representatives with staff from the Crop Trust, the international organization that helps coordinate seed deposits from gene banks around the world. These inspections involve traveling to Svalbard, entering the facility, checking all systems and structures, examining storage conditions, verifying that temperatures and humidity levels remain within acceptable ranges, looking for any signs of deterioration or problems that might require attention and documenting everything thoroughly for future reference. The inspections provide opportunities to deposit new seed samples, to perform minor repairs or adjustments, and to assess whether any major maintenance or upgrades might be needed in the coming years. The annual maintenance costs for operating the Svalbard Global Seed Vault amount to approximately 2.4 million Norwegian kroner, a sum that covers the various expenses associated with keeping the facility functional and secure. This includes the electricity for running cooling systems and monitoring equipment, the costs of the annual inspection visits, routine maintenance and repairs, insurance and administrative expenses, and the ongoing monitoring that occurs remotely throughout the year. When converted to other currencies or compared to the budgets of other international facilities, this amount appears remarkably modest, especially considering what the vault preserves and protects. The relatively low operating costs reflect the efficiency of the design, the way the facility works with natural Arctic conditions rather than fighting against them, requiring less energy and less intensive management than a similar facility in a warmer climate would demand. This efficiency ensures that the vault can continue its mission indefinitely without placing unsustainable financial burdens on Norway or the international community, making it not just a technically sound solution but an economically sustainable one as well, capable of persisting across the generations and centuries for which it was designed. The purpose of this facility, the reason for all the planning and engineering and international cooperation, comes down to something both simple and profound. The Svalbard Global Seed Vault serves as a secure backup for the world's crop diversity, a safety net for the biological foundation of human food systems. In a world where so much exists in digital form, where we routinely back up our computers and store copies of important files in multiple locations, the vault represents the same principle applied to something infinitely more precious and irreplaceable, the genetic diversity of the plants that feed humanity. These seeds, resting in their frozen chambers, represent not just individual varieties of crops but entire lineages of agricultural development, thousands of years of human selection and adaptation, the accumulated wisdom of countless farmers who saved seeds from their best plants and passed them on to the next generation. The vault functions as an insurance policy for approximately 1,700 gene banks that exist around the world, facilities ranging from small national collections to major international repositories, each maintaining their own samples of crop varieties that are important to their regions or their research programs. These gene banks work diligently to preserve their collections, to maintain the viability of their seeds through regular testing and regeneration, to document and catalog what they hold so that researchers and farmers can access these resources when needed. But gene banks face numerous threats: natural disasters like floods and earthquakes, conflicts and wars that can destroy infrastructure, equipment failures that might allow temperatures to rise and seeds to die, funding shortages that force difficult choices about what can be maintained. The Svalbard facility provides these institutions with peace of mind, knowing that even if disaster strikes their own collection, copies of their most important seeds will survive in the Arctic, available for withdrawal and use in rebuilding what was lost. This backup function becomes especially crucial as we face the accelerating loss of agricultural biodiversity driven by climate change and the spread of monoculture farming systems. Climate change threatens crops in multiple ways: shifting temperature patterns, altered rainfall, new pests and diseases spreading into regions where they never existed before, extreme weather events that can devastate harvests. Meanwhile, modern industrial agriculture has increasingly focused on a small number of high-yielding varieties, planting the same few cultivars across vast areas, abandoning the traditional practice of maintaining diverse local varieties adapted to specific conditions. This narrowing of genetic diversity makes our food systems more vulnerable, more fragile, because when all crops are genetically similar, a single disease or pest or climate shift can threaten entire harvests. The vault preserves the diversity that monoculture discards, maintaining varieties that might prove essential for developing crops that can withstand future challenges we cannot yet predict. The seeds that receive priority for storage in the vault are those vital for food production and sustainable agriculture, crops that form the foundation of human nutrition and that will be essential for feeding future populations. These include the major staples like wheat and rice and corn that provide the bulk of calories for billions of people, but also the diverse array of vegetables, fruits, legumes, and other crops that contribute to nutritious diets and that support agricultural systems in different climates and cultures around the world. The selection process considers not just current importance but potential future value, recognizing that varieties that seem minor or unimportant today might become crucial as conditions change, as researchers look for traits like drought tolerance or disease resistance or nutritional content that exists in traditional varieties but has been lost in modern commercial cultivars. The ultimate ambition of the Svalbard Global Seed Vault is remarkably comprehensive, to eventually store every crop seed variety that humans have ever used, creating a complete library of agricultural biodiversity that spans the entire history of farming from the first domestication of wild plants thousands of years ago to the most recently developed modern varieties. This goal represents not just preservation but documentation, not just storage but a kind of archive of humanity's relationship with plants, capturing the diversity that has emerged through natural evolution and human selection across countless environments and cultures. Achieving this complete collection remains a work in progress, with new varieties still being identified in remote regions, with gene banks continuing to collect and characterize seeds from traditional farmers who maintain old varieties, with the vault steadily accepting new deposits that fill gaps in the global collection. Already, the vault represents the world's largest collection of crop diversity, surpassing any other single facility in the breadth and depth of what it holds. The sheer number of samples stored here, the geographic range they represent, the variety of crops included, from familiar staples to obscure regional specialties, makes this collection unmatched in its comprehensiveness. This status as the largest collection carries both pride and responsibility, a recognition that this facility has become the ultimate repository for agricultural genetic resources, the place where the most complete record of crop diversity exists, the backup that other backups depend upon. Seeds from gene banks in over 127 countries rest within the vault's chambers, each sample representing decisions made by scientists and agricultural specialists about what deserves preservation, what might be needed in the future, what genetic resources their nations value and wish to safeguard. This geographic diversity ensures that the collection captures crops and varieties adapted to tropical heat and Arctic cold, to wet climates and dry, to high altitudes and sea level, to acidic soils and alkaline, to every combination of conditions where humans have managed to grow food. Since the vault opened in 2008, more than 100 countries have actively contributed seeds, participating in this global effort to preserve agricultural biodiversity, demonstrating that concerns about food security and genetic diversity cross all borders and political divisions. For low- and middle-income countries, the vault provides a especially valuable service, offering a secure backup for unique crop diversity that might otherwise be at risk due to limited resources for maintaining gene banks or due to political instability or environmental challenges that threaten local collections. Many of these nations harbor tremendous agricultural biodiversity, with farmers still growing traditional varieties that have been adapted over generations to local conditions, varieties that might possess valuable traits not found in commercial crops. But maintaining proper gene banks requires funding, expertise, and infrastructure that can be difficult to sustain, making the Svalbard backup crucial for ensuring that this diversity isn't lost if national facilities face difficulties. The vault provides equal protection regardless of a country's wealth or political status, ensuring that seeds from the poorest nations receive the same careful preservation as those from the richest, that agricultural diversity is valued for its intrinsic importance rather than for any economic or political calculations. The Crop Trust, an international organization dedicated to conserving crop diversity and supporting gene banks worldwide, plays a vital role in making the vault accessible to countries that might otherwise struggle to participate. The Trust provides funding to help cover the costs of preparing seeds for deposit and shipping them to Svalbard, recognizing that even though storage at the vault is free, the process of properly drying seeds, testing their viability, packaging them according to specifications, and arranging transport to the Arctic can involve expenses that some gene banks cannot easily afford. By covering these costs for developing countries, the Crop Trust ensures that financial limitations don't prevent important diversity from being backed up, that the vault's collection remains truly global and comprehensive, representing the full spectrum of agricultural biodiversity rather than just the varieties that wealthy nations happen to maintain. This support transforms the vault from a facility that theoretically serves everyone into one that practically serves everyone, making the promise of global food security back up a reality rather than just an aspiration, ensuring that the agricultural heritage of all humanity receives protection regardless of where those seeds originated or who currently maintains them in their home collections. As of June in 2025, the collection within the vault's frozen chambers has grown to hold over 1.35 million seed accessions, each accession representing a distinct variety of a crop, a unique genetic line that has been carefully collected, documented, and preserved. By late in 2025, this number has continued to climb, reaching over 1.37 million samples, a testament to the ongoing work of gene banks around the world who continue to identify important varieties, prepare them for long-term storage, and send them to Svalbard for safekeeping. This steady growth demonstrates that the vault is not a static archive but a living collection that expands as scientists discover new varieties worth preserving, as traditional farmers share seeds they've maintained for generations, as plant breeders develop new cultivars with valuable traits, and as the global community increasingly recognizes the importance of backing up agricultural diversity in this secure Arctic repository. These million-plus accessions represent an extraordinary breadth of plant diversity, encompassing more than 6,500 species of crops and their wild relatives. This number goes far beyond the handful of major crops that most people encounter in their daily meals, extending to include countless regional specialties, traditional varieties, wild relatives of domesticated crops that might harbor valuable genes, and species that were once important food sources but have fallen out of common use. Each species within this collection carries its own evolutionary history, its own set of adaptations to particular environments and growing conditions, its own potential contributions to future agricultural development. The diversity captured here spans from familiar staples to obscure plants that only a few specialists might recognize, from crops grown on every continent to varieties specific to small regions or islands, creating a tapestry of biological variation that reflects the full complexity of humanity's relationship with cultivated plants. This collection reaches back through time in a profound way, reflecting over 13,000 years of agricultural history, stretching from the very earliest days when humans first began to deliberately cultivate plants, selecting seeds from wild species and gradually transforming them through generations of selective breeding into the domesticated crops we know today. Some of the varieties stored in the vault trace their lineage back thousands of years, representing agricultural traditions that have been maintained continuously across countless generations, while others are more recent developments, products of modern plant breeding programs that have combined genes from multiple sources to create new varieties with specific desired characteristics. Together, these seeds form a kind of genetic timeline, a record written in living tissue rather than in text or artifacts, capturing the cumulative knowledge and effort of every farmer and plant breeder who has ever selected seeds and passed them forward. Despite the impressive number of samples already stored, the vault has been designed with substantial capacity for future growth, able to hold up to 4.5 million seed samples in its chambers. This capacity was deliberately planned to be far larger than current needs, recognizing that collections would continue to expand over decades and centuries, that new varieties would be developed, that gene banks would continue to collect traditional varieties before they disappear, and that the vault needed to be able to accommodate this growth without requiring expansion or modification. The empty space within the chambers represents potential, room for discoveries yet to be made, for varieties yet to be collected, for future contributions from countries and institutions that might not yet have participated in the project, ensuring that the vault can continue accepting new deposits for the foreseeable future without approaching capacity limits. When translated into individual seeds rather than samples or accessions, the vault's total capacity becomes even more staggering. Up to 2.5 billion individual seeds, each one a tiny packet of genetic information, a potential plant waiting to grow when conditions allow. This number is difficult to truly comprehend, so large that it loses concrete meaning and becomes abstract, but it represents an almost incomprehensible amount of biological diversity, billions of opportunities for crops to grow and reproduce, billions of individual lives held in suspension within those frozen chambers. Each seed, though microscopically small, contains all the information needed to produce a complete plant, to flower and fruit and create the next generation, holding within its compact structure the accumulated wisdom of thousands of years of evolution and selection. The collection currently encompasses seeds from over 6,000 species, a number that continues to grow as gene banks deposit samples from newly collected or characterized varieties. This species count includes not just the crops themselves but also their wild relatives, plants that might not be directly useful for food production but that carry genes that could prove valuable for crop improvement. Wild relatives often possess traits like disease resistance or drought tolerance that have been lost in domesticated varieties through generations of selection for other characteristics, and preserving these wild species ensures that breeders will have access to this genetic diversity when they need to develop new varieties that can withstand emerging challenges. Among all these diverse species and varieties, the distribution of what's stored reflects the relative importance of different crop types in global food systems. About 6 to 9% of the accessions are grains like rice and wheat, the cereals that provide the foundation of human nutrition across most of the world, that supply the bulk of calories consumed daily by billions of people. These grains receive such heavy representation because they've been cultivated in so many different environments, adapted to countless local conditions, developed into thousands of distinct varieties over the millennia of human agriculture. Each variety of wheat or rice represents slightly different characteristics, differences in growing season length, in temperature tolerance, in disease resistance, in grain quality, in yield potential, and preserving this diversity ensures that farmers and breeders will have options when they need to develop crops suited to changing conditions or specific needs. Roughly 9% of the collection consists of legumes, plants like beans and peas and lentils that provide essential protein in diets around the world, that fix nitrogen in soil and improve agricultural sustainability, that grow in diverse climates from tropical to temperate. Though they represent a smaller percentage than grains, legumes are crucial for nutrition and for maintaining soil health in farming systems, and the diversity of legume varieties stored in the vault reflects centuries of selection for local preferences in taste and texture, for adaptation to different rainfall patterns and soil types, for resistance to various pests and diseases that affect these crops in different regions. Some deposits to the vault represent particularly focused efforts to preserve diversity within specific crops that face special challenges or opportunities. In 2018, Brazil made a remarkable contribution by depositing over 50,000 varieties of coffee, a crop of enormous economic and cultural importance that faces significant threats from climate change and disease. Coffee grows in a relatively narrow range of conditions, thriving in specific combinations of temperature, rainfall, and altitude, and as climate patterns shift, traditional growing regions may become unsuitable while new areas might become viable. The coffee varieties stored in the vault represent genetic diversity from across coffee-growing regions, including wild relatives and traditional cultivars that might possess traits valuable for developing varieties that can tolerate warmer temperatures, resist diseases like coffee rust, or produce high-quality beans under different conditions than current commercial varieties require. This single deposit, these 50,000 coffee accessions, demonstrate how the vault can serve as a repository for the full diversity within crops that might otherwise be vulnerable to catastrophic loss if disease or climate change were to devastate commercial production before alternative varieties could be developed and distributed to farmers who depend on this crop for their livelihoods. The seeds themselves rest within the vault's chambers wrapped in layers of protection, sealed inside airtight aluminum foil packages that shield them from moisture and oxygen, the two elements that would most quickly threaten their viability if allowed to reach the frozen embryos within. These packages use 3-ply or 4-ply foil, multiple thin layers laminated together to create a barrier that's both flexible enough to handle without tearing and robust enough to maintain its integrity across decades or centuries of storage in the extreme cold. The choice of aluminum foil for this purpose reflects careful research into materials that remain stable at very low temperatures, that don't become brittle or develop tiny cracks that might allow moisture to seep through, that can be heat-sealed to create packages that remain airtight for time span that extend far beyond ordinary human planning horizons. Inside each of these silvery packages rest approximately 500 seeds on average, though the exact number varies depending on the size of the seeds themselves and the policies of the gene bank that prepared them for deposit. 500 represents a balance, enough seeds to ensure that even if some fail to germinate after long storage, plenty of viable seeds will remain to regenerate the variety, but not so many that the package becomes unwieldy or that preparing deposits becomes prohibitively expensive for gene banks with limited resources. For small seeds like lettuce or carrot, 500 might fit easily in a package smaller than your palm, while for larger seeds like beans or corn, the same number would fill a more substantial pouch. But in either case, these 500 seeds represent a complete genetic sample, enough diversity within the variety to capture its essential characteristics and allow it to be grown out and multiplied if ever needed. These individual packages are organized into larger storage containers, sturdy boxes that can hold up to 400 separate seed samples, arranged carefully so that each package can be identified and retrieved if necessary without disturbing the others. The containers themselves are designed to protect their contents while allowing efficient use of space within the storage chambers, stacking securely on shelves without risk of collapse or damage, maintaining organization even as hundreds of thousands of packages accumulate over years of deposits. Each container is labeled with information about what it holds, which gene bank deposited these samples, when they arrived, creating a system of organization that allows the millions of accessions to be tracked and located despite the vast scale of the collection. The organizational scheme for the vault might surprise those who imagine seeds arranged by crop type, with all the wheat in one area and all the rice in another. Instead, seeds are organized by depositor, with all the samples from a particular gene bank stored together regardless of what species they represent. This approach reflects the legal and practical reality that each gene bank retains ownership of the seeds they deposit, that they're the ones who would withdraw samples if needed, and that organizing by depositor makes it easier to manage these relationships and track who has contributed what. It also means that a single container might hold packages of wheat and beans and carrots and flowers, a diverse collection that reflects whatever that particular gene bank chose to send for backup storage during a particular deposit event. The shelving that holds these containers rises up to 10 levels high within the chambers, maximizing the use of vertical space and allowing enormous quantities of seeds to be stored in relatively compact areas. Walking into one of these chambers, you would see walls of shelving stretching toward the ceiling, each level laden with containers, creating a sense of density and abundance of precious material carefully organized and preserved. The shelving systems were designed specifically for this environment, constructed from materials that remain stable and strong in the intense cold, that won't warp or weaken over time, that can support the substantial weight of thousands of containers without risk of failure. The vault's design includes 3 separate storage halls, large chambers carved into the mountain stone, each one capable of holding vast numbers of seed samples. But currently, only one of these 3 halls is in active use, holding all of the 1.37 million accessions that have been deposited so far. The 2 additional halls stand ready for future expansion, empty spaces waiting to be filled as the collection continues to grow, as more gene banks send deposits, as new varieties are developed and preserved. This arrangement provides enormous room for growth without requiring any construction or modification of the facility, allowing the vault to continue accepting deposits for decades to come before the first hall reaches capacity and the second needs to be brought into service. Each of these halls measures roughly 27 meters in length and 9.5 meters in width, substantial chambers that provide considerable space for the rows of high shelving that hold the seed containers. These dimensions were calculated to optimize several factors, providing enough space for efficient organization and access, fitting within the practical limits of what could be excavated from the mountain, allowing for proper air circulation to maintain consistent temperatures throughout the chamber, and creating rooms that feel manageable in scale despite the enormous number of samples they hold. The consistent dimensions across all 3 halls ensure that equipment and procedures developed for the first hall will work equally well in the others when they're eventually needed. The Vault's collection strategy focuses deliberately on preserving unique genetic material, on capturing diversity rather than simply accumulating volume. Gene banks are encouraged to deposit samples that represent distinct varieties, that offer genetic characteristics not already well represented in the collection, avoiding sending duplicates of varieties that have already been safely backed up. This approach maximizes the value of the vault's capacity, ensuring that the limited space available is used to preserve the broadest possible range of agricultural diversity rather than storing multiple copies of the same varieties. The coordinators who work with depositing gene banks help them identify which of their accessions would be most valuable to send, which represent gaps in the global collection, which carry unique traits or historical significance that make them especially worth preserving. However, the strategy also recognizes the importance of security through redundancy within each accession. When a gene bank deposits a variety, they ensure that enough seeds are included so that at least 50 will remain viable per accession even after accounting for the gradual decline in germination rates that occurs over very long storage periods. This number, 50 viable seeds, represents the minimum considered necessary to successfully regenerate a variety, to grow out enough plants that the genetic diversity within that variety is maintained, that inbreeding doesn't occur, that the regenerated seeds remain true to the original characteristics. By ensuring this minimum viable number even after decades or centuries of storage, the vault provides genuine insurance rather than just symbolic preservation, guaranteeing that if seeds are ever needed, enough will germinate to actually restore what was lost, to put the variety back into cultivation. To make the genetic traits it carries available once again for farmers or breeders who might need them for reasons we cannot yet anticipate, but that the vault's existence acknowledges as possible. And worth preparing for across whatever span of time the future requires. The vault accepts only what scientists call orthodox seeds, varieties that possess the natural ability to tolerate the process of drying and freezing that's essential for long-term storage at -18 degrees Celsius. These orthodox seeds can have their moisture content reduced to very low levels, can be cooled to temperatures well below freezing, and will remain viable for extended periods under these conditions. Their metabolic processes slowed to an almost imperceptible crawl but capable of reactivating when the seeds are eventually warmed and given water. This characteristic isn't universal among plants, it's a trait that some species possess and others don't, and it determines which crops can be preserved through this method of conservation and which require different approaches entirely. Recalcitrant seeds, those that cannot survive the drying and freezing process, must be excluded from the vault despite their importance to agriculture and nutrition. These include crops like cocoa, the source of chocolate that's grown across tropical regions and valued both economically and culturally, and certain types of coffee that produce seeds sensitive to desiccation. Recalcitrant seeds remain metabolically active and require relatively warm, moist conditions to stay alive, meaning they cannot be stored frozen and instead must be preserved through other methods like cryogenic preservation in liquid nitrogen or through maintaining living field collections where the plants continue to grow. This limitation means the vault cannot serve as a universal backup for all agricultural diversity, cannot protect certain important crops that humanity depends upon, representing one of the few significant gaps in what this facility can accomplish. Even orthodox seeds, properly dried and frozen, don't remain viable indefinitely without attention. Gene banks that deposit samples at Svalbard must periodically replace those samples every 10 to 20 years as viability gradually declines over time, as the percentage of seeds that would successfully germinate slowly drops. This replacement cycle involves growing out some of the seeds maintained in the gene bank's active collection, harvesting fresh seeds from those plants, preparing new samples according to vault specifications, and sending updated deposits to replace the aging ones. This process, called regeneration, ensures that the backup at Svalbard always consists of relatively fresh seeds with high germination rates, maintaining the vault's function as reliable insurance rather than allowing it to slowly fill with samples that might not actually grow if ever needed. The legal framework governing the vault establishes clearly that seeds deposited here remain the absolute property of the depositing gene banks, that placing samples in Svalbard for safekeeping doesn't transfer ownership or grant anyone else rights to those seeds. This arrangement provides crucial reassurance to countries and institutions that might otherwise hesitate to send their most valuable genetic resources to an international facility, worried that doing so might somehow compromise their control or allow others to access materials they've carefully collected and maintained. The vault serves purely as a storage service, a secure backup location, without claiming any ownership interest in what it protects. The facility operates under strict black box rules that reinforce this separation between storage and ownership, between physical possession and legal rights. These rules establish clear protocols about who can access what and under what circumstances, creating a system where depositors maintain full control over their materials even though those materials rest in Norwegian territory under international agreements. The black box concept means that what goes into the vault from a particular depositor remains sealed and inaccessible except under very specific conditions, creating confidence that participation in this global backup system won't result in unauthorized access to valuable genetic resources. Vault staff, the Norwegian personnel who manage the physical facility and the international coordinators who work with depositing gene banks, never open the sealed packages that depositors send. When containers arrive at Svalbard, they're logged into the database, assigned storage locations, and placed on shelves, but the packages themselves remain sealed exactly as the depositing gene bank prepared them. This policy ensures that the contents remain the exclusive domain of the depositor, that no one else examines or handles or has the opportunity to remove seeds from the packages, maintaining the security and integrity that makes gene banks willing to entrust their most important materials to this facility. Seeds stored in the vault are accessible only by the depositor who placed them there or by someone with explicit written permission from that depositor. If a research institution wants to study a particular variety stored at Svalbard, they cannot simply request it from the vault. They must contact the gene bank that owns those seeds, negotiate access according to whatever terms that gene bank establishes, and only if permission is granted will a withdrawal be processed. This arrangement respects international agreements about genetic resources and ensures that countries retain control over materials they've collected within their territories, preventing the vault from becoming a way to circumvent the legal frameworks that govern access to agricultural biodiversity. When a depositor does need to withdraw seeds, perhaps because their active collection has been damaged or destroyed and they need to regenerate varieties from the Svalbard backup, the process requires 24 hours notice to arrange the logistics of retrieving the specific samples from the chambers, preparing them for transport, and ensuring that appropriate personnel are available to manage the transfer. This notice period isn't burdensome. Given that seeds are being stored for long-term security rather than frequent access, a day's wait represents reasonable time for coordination. But it reflects the reality that the vault operates with minimal staff and requires some preparation to conduct withdrawal operations safely and correctly. The Arctic environment surrounding the vault presents hazards that extend beyond cold temperatures and harsh weather. Polar bears roam Svalbard freely. These massive predators that can weigh several hundred kilograms and that possess no fear of humans, regarding anything that moves as potential prey. When seed deposits arrive and need to be transported from the airport to the vault, or when staff visit to conduct inspections or oversee withdrawals, armed guards trained in polar bear safety escort the transport and stand watch during operations. These guards carry rifles and know how to recognize polar bear behavior, how to identify when a bear is simply curious versus when it might be considering an approach, how to use warning shots or noise to deter bears without harming them, and how to protect human life if a bear attack becomes imminent despite all precautions. Near the vault entrance, a sign warns visitors about the polar bear danger, reminding anyone who approaches this remote facility that they're entering territory that belongs as much to these powerful animals as to humans. The sign represents both practical safety advice and a kind of philosophical statement about Svalbard itself. This is a place where nature still dominates, where human activities must accommodate themselves to an environment that remains wild and untamed, where the seeds rest protected not just by human engineering but by the sheer remoteness and challenging conditions that make this location so secure. The polar bears, in their way, serve as additional guardians, creatures whose presence ensures that casual visitors won't wander to the vault, that this facility remains isolated and protected by both the harsh Arctic landscape and the magnificent predators that have adapted to thrive in conditions that humans can only temporarily endure with substantial technological support and careful precautions against both the environment and its most formidable inhabitants. In 2015, the vault fulfilled its core purpose for the first time when ICARDA, the International Center for Agricultural Research in the Dry Areas, made the first ever withdrawal of seeds from the Svalbard collection. Icada had maintained a major gene bank in Aleppo, Syria, holding one of the world's most important collections of wheat, barley, and legume varieties adapted to dry conditions, crops crucial for agriculture across the Middle East and North Africa. But the Syrian civil war had made it impossible to continue operations at the Aleppo facility, with fighting in the region and the general collapse of infrastructure threatening this irreplaceable collection. The scientists at Icada needed to retrieve their backup samples from Svalbard so they could continue their research and conservation work from safer locations, demonstrating exactly the scenario that the vault had been designed to address: a major gene bank facing catastrophic circumstances beyond anyone's control, needing access to seeds that had been preserved against precisely this kind of emergency. Further withdrawals followed in 2017 as Icada continued working to rebuild their collection and resume their research programs despite the ongoing conflict that prevented any return to their Syrian facility. Each withdrawal involved coordination between Icada staff, Norwegian authorities managing the vault, and the Crop Trust that helps coordinate international seed conservation efforts, with specific samples being retrieved from the frozen chambers, packaged for transport, and shipped to locations where they could be properly handled and used. These withdrawals represented not failure but success, proof that the vault's insurance policy was real and functional, that seeds deposited for safekeeping could actually be recovered and put back into use when circumstances required. The withdrawn seeds were regenerated in Lebanon and Morocco, countries where Icada established temporary facilities and field sites where they could grow out the seeds, produce fresh harvests, and rebuild their working collection. Regeneration involves planting the seeds, allowing the plants to grow and flower and produce the next generation, carefully managing the process to maintain genetic purity and ensure that the characteristics of each variety remain true to the original. This work requires substantial effort and resources: suitable land, appropriate growing conditions, skilled staff who understand how to maintain varietal identity, facilities for cleaning and storing the harvested seeds. But it allowed Icada to restore what war had destroyed, to continue serving farmers and researchers who depended on access to these genetic resources. In 2023, after years of careful regeneration work, Icada was able to redeposit seeds of Syrian wheat back into the Svalbard vault, completing a remarkable circle of preservation and recovery. These redeposited seeds represented varieties that had been threatened by conflict, saved through the vault's backup system, regenerated in safe locations, and now returned to secure storage for future safekeeping. This cycle demonstrated the full functionality of the global seed conservation system, showing how the vault integrates with active gene banks around the world, serving as both backup and source, both insurance policy and practical resource that can be drawn upon when needed and replenished when circumstances allow. The vault's collection includes seeds from sources that extend beyond traditional research institutions and national gene banks, encompassing contributions from indigenous communities who have maintained traditional crop varieties as part of their cultural heritage and agricultural practices. In Peru, a community organization called Parque de la Papa, which translates to Potato Park, deposited samples of potato varieties that indigenous farmers in the Andes have cultivated for generations. These potatoes represent varieties adapted to high-altitude conditions, selected for characteristics that matter to the communities who grow and eat them: flavor, texture, cooking qualities, ceremonial significance, characteristics that commercial breeding programs might overlook but that represent genuine diversity and cultural value worth preserving. In 2020, the Cherokee Nation became the first tribal nation from the United States to deposit seeds at Svalbard, sending samples of traditional varieties that Cherokee people have maintained through their long history, through forced removal and displacement, through the deliberate efforts of community members who recognized the importance of preserving these connections to agricultural traditions that predated European colonization. The Cherokee deposit included varieties of beans and squash and other crops that carry cultural significance beyond their agricultural value, representing continuity with ancestors and maintaining knowledge systems that see seeds not just as commodities but as sacred responsibilities passed between generations. This participation in the Global Vault by indigenous nations acknowledges that seed conservation isn't only a scientific endeavor but also a cultural one, that preserving agricultural diversity means honoring the knowledge and practices of the communities who developed and maintained that diversity long before modern gene banks existed. Among the major depositors to the vault, international research centers like CIMMYT and IRI rank at the top in terms of number of accessions contributed. CIMMYT, the International Maize and Wheat Improvement Center based in Mexico, maintains one of the world's largest collections of wheat and maize genetic resources, accumulated through decades of collection expeditions and breeding programs. IRI, the International Rice Research Institute in the Philippines, holds similar status for rice, the grain that feeds more than half of humanity, with collections spanning varieties from across Asia and beyond. These institutions have deposited tens of thousands of accessions at Svalbard, backing up their extensive collections and ensuring that if anything were to happen to their facilities, the genetic resources they've spent decades assembling would survive. Seed Savers Exchange, a grassroots organization based in the United States that focuses on preserving heirloom vegetables and traditional varieties maintained by home gardeners and small farmers, makes regular annual deposits to the vault. Each year, Seed Savers Exchange selects varieties from their collection to prepare and ship to Svalbard, steadily building a backup of the diverse and sometimes quirky vegetables that might not be important to commercial agriculture but that represent culinary traditions, regional adaptations, and the work of countless gardeners who saved seeds because they valued particular flavors or growth habits or simply the satisfaction of maintaining varieties that connected them to their ancestors. These annual deposits demonstrate that the vault serves not just major institutional collections but also community-based conservation efforts, recognizing that diversity exists in many forms and deserves protection regardless of its commercial status. Bill Gates, through his foundation's agricultural development initiatives, has provided funding to help gene banks multiply and prepare seeds for deposit at Svalbard, supporting the costs of growing out varieties, testing them, preparing samples according to vault specifications, and shipping them to the Arctic. This funding has helped accelerate the filling of the vault, particularly enabling deposits from gene banks in developing countries that might lack resources for these preparation activities. However, Gates has no special access rights to the seeds stored at Svalbard. His financial support doesn't grant any ownership or access privileges beyond what any other member of the public might theoretically request through proper channels. The seeds remain the property of the depositing gene banks, and the black box rules apply equally regardless of who funded their preparation, ensuring that financial contribution doesn't translate into genetic resource control. Plant breeders around the world rely on the genetic diversity preserved in gene banks and backed up at Svalbard as raw material for developing new crop varieties that can address emerging challenges. When pests evolve resistance to current defenses, when diseases emerge that threaten major crops, when climate patterns shift and farmers need varieties that can tolerate new temperature ranges or altered rainfall, breeders turn to gene bank collections searching for genetic traits that might provide solutions. A variety that hasn't been commercially grown for 50 years might carry a gene for disease resistance that proves crucial for protecting wheat harvests. A traditional rice variety adapted to flooding might provide the genetic basis for developing new varieties that can survive the extreme weather events that climate change is making more frequent. The Vault's role in backing up these collections ensures that this genetic toolbox remains available for breeders to draw upon, that the raw material for agricultural adaptation and improvement doesn't disappear before its value is recognized, that traits we don't currently need but might desperately require in the future remain preserved and accessible, waiting in frozen suspension for the moment when human ingenuity and necessity combine to put them to use in ways that keep our food systems resilient and productive despite whatever challenges the coming decades and centuries might bring to farmers working to feed a growing human population on a planet whose climate and ecosystems continue to change in ways we're only beginning to understand and address.